Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I like to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. I am currently trying to world build a broader Feywild, trying to make a part 2 for the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, since that's what I'm running for my players right now. The source book that we're using, it's blocked off from the rest of the Feywild. It's not supposed to be that big of a campaign, but I want to do a part 2. And so I'm gathering different stories and different interesting culture things relating to the Feywild and sort of seeing how they can contribute to that. Today I'm going to talk about 3 different German fairy tales that I pulled. I was going to do German folklore, but when I looked into it, I was brought to fairy tales specifically, and I knew that, you know, with Brothers Grimm, they're supposed to be kind of weird and a little dark. The Feywild to me is very whimsical and fun, but also dark and unsettling, and I feel like Brothers Grimm German fairy tale stories really capture that. Only one of these is Brothers Grimm because I didn't want to stick to it too strongly, but I'll get into that more in a moment because I need to do Idea of the Week. Idea of the Week has not been done in about 3 weeks, but it's the part of the show where I highlight a comment that I thought was particularly fun or interesting or had a really good D&D idea. So this week, I wanted to pull from the user Edward Rooney, who commented, one creature you could use as a D&D equivalent for Grindel's mother would be a sea hag, seeing as they're both aquatic female creatures with a hatred of humanity. I might combine a Arthurian legend with Beowulf and say that Grindel's mother and the Lady of the Lake are rivals. And you can read the rest of the comment below. But what I really liked about this one is I've been thinking a lot about Arthurian legend and knighthood and these classic stories about kingdoms and trying to incorporate those in the Feywild and in the courts and try to make it a bit strange. And in my video on Beowulf, I hadn't been totally sure on how to handle Grindel's mom. I had a few ideas, but that is such a good idea. That being said, there were so many good ideas. That one particularly interested me because it mentioned Arthurian legend and sort of combining it with Beowulf, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. But all of the ideas are really cool. So I just want to thank you again for the comments you've been leaving because it is so fun to just see what your ideas are and to reply to you. And I'm already recognizing quite a handful of users who are commenting pretty regularly. And I don't know, can I say we're friends? I feel like we're friends. I feel like it's a little too early to try to do a fan base name, but in my head, I'm kind of calling you my fiends. I'm like, yeah, those are my Feywild fiends. Do you like it? You can tell me if you don't. I don't know, I thought it was cool. But if you too want to become Idea of the Week, comment below on this video your ideas. Interact with these fairy tales, what ideas you have, any other fairy tales that you might want me to check out, or anything D&D related that you want me to check out. Whenever you guys mention something, even if I'm not going to do it very soon, it all goes on a master list for me to say, okay, when is this going to be right? So I want to do the things you suggest, so leave comments and let me know what you want. Let's get into these fairy tales. I have linked below the website that I found that just listed a bunch of fairy tales, so I don't know how accurate these are to actual German culture. All I know is that they claim to be German, they have the authors on there, so I just figured it would be fine to use this website so you can see what I used, and if I'm not sticking to the original German tales, I'm sorry. I'm 25% German, so I think I'd know. For our first fairy tale, we have Brunhilda. In Brunhilda is a princess. Her husband wants her to marry, so he invites suitors to come and meet his daughter. A prince does come, and he instantly falls in love with Brunhilda. Brunhilda instantly falls in love with him, and they swear to be married. The prince says, okay, just gotta go let my family know, I'll be right back, and he goes off to his kingdom. In the meantime, there are giants who live in the north, and one of these giants is very wealthy and very dangerous, and he also wants the princess. So he comes with a big display of wealth, thinking it'll impress her and her dad, and it does impress her dad, who's like, actually, honey, you're gonna marry this guy. The king is also kind of too afraid to tell the guy no. He thinks that if he angered him that the castle would collapse, and so Brunhilda has to marry him. But she's not gonna let that happen. She prays and prays for the prince she loves to return, but it is just not seeming like it's going to happen in time. And so leading up to the wedding, she notices that this giant, this man, has two horses that he's brought with him. One is a white horse, one is a black horse. Classic. He rides the black horse, the white horse is for her. And so she says, can you teach me how to ride it? Because she's thinking that looks like a fast horse. I could escape on that. And he teaches her. He's very happy to do it. The night before the wedding, the princess pretends like she is going to go to bed, get ready for the next day, but instead she sneaks out to the stables, takes the white horse, and runs. Her goal is to make it to the prince's castle, the one she fell in love with, and the giant, unfortunately, hears the sound of her leaving, goes, jumps on his horse, and they start a chase. This is a really long chase. I think it lasts throughout the night up until Brunhilda and her horse, like they can see the kingdom up ahead. She knows once she's there, she's safe, and then her horse stops and she realizes they've reached a ravine, a very deep ravine, and she has to make a choice. She decides it would be better to risk jumping the ravine and possibly falling to her death than being married to this very angry giant. I'd like to read you how the story ends. A joyous cry burst from the lips of the princess when her horse's hoof struck the rock on the opposite side of the great ravine. Then her horse fell exhausted, but the heroic deed was accomplished and Brunhilda was saved. Only her golden crown was lost. It slipped from her head as she crossed the ravine and fell into a deep pool at the foot of the chasm. As Bodo, that's the giant's name, saw the princess pass like a floating cloud over the gorge, he uttered a wild cry of anger and rage, which echoed like thunder from cliff to cliff. Then he spurred his charger to the edge of the chasm, and he too ventured the terrible leap, but the weight of the giant was great, and horse and rider fell with a mighty splash into the torrent below. Here, beneath the deep green water, lay Brunhilda's crown, and Bodo was transformed into a hound whose duty was ever to guard and protect it. I think there's a few things you could do with this story, but what I really like is the detail of the crown and the giant turning into a hound. Generally, the Feywild is divided into 4 courts. Not every part of the Feywild is in those courts, but those are like the main regions. We have the summer, spring, fall, and winter courts. I'm thinking kind of classic winter court, bad guys, summer, spring, and fall court, like good or at least okay guys, the Seelie court. I'm interested in a ravine specifically dividing the summer and the winter courts, or at least part of it. And if this story were true, whether it was actually a princess or just a noble lady, had she tried to escape from the winter court to the summer court and jumped this ravine, that a crown could have fallen from her head. I also think we could go with giants, yes, or Fomorians. Those are supposed to be pretty evil beings that would quite unsettle a noble lady to be promised to marry one of those. I don't know, maybe. And whether giant or Fomorian or something else, when this being failed to also jump the ravine after her and fell to the bottom, I feel like he should turn into a Yeth-hound. I've talked about Yeth-hounds in previous videos. They are evil, fey creatures. They look like dogs, and I know that if they howl, then anyone within 300 feet of them becomes frightened. So this would be a creature that would really keep other beings away from even the crown's vicinity. So this crown has to be important. Maybe Brunhilda, or whatever you name her, wants it back. She wants this crown. Maybe it's a marker of her rulership over a certain realm within probably the winter court, but it all depends. I'll let you decide where she's from. But we could also imbue this crown with some sort of magic, where the wearer, if you had a party that went all the way down into a ravine, fought this hound, found the crown, and placed it upon their head, maybe it would grant them extra speed. She had to be quick to escape this guy, so maybe the crown carried that magic. Maybe whenever that crown is upon your head, I think this would be very fun and like Feywild chaotic. Its magical presence makes Fomorians or giants or whatever that guy was fall in love with the wearer. I'm curious what you do with this story, or what you do with the crown. Like, if you're going to give it a magical effect, what are you doing? The next fairy tale is called The Shroud by Brothers Grimm. By the way, I read quite a few fairy tales for this video, and these are the ones that I read that I felt best translated to the D&D world. But if you want me to do a part 2 to this video, read a few more, give you some more ideas, let me know. The Shroud is a very short story. It's only about a paragraph. In it, a 7-year-old boy, very handsome, very lovable, falls ill and dies. His mother is devastated and weeps and weeps. Every night she sees the little boy playing where he used to play, sitting where he liked to sit. He's clearly not moved on to the next world. And one night he comes to her and says, "Hey, can you please stop crying on my shroud? It's so wet that I can't move on." For his sake, the mother stops crying. The next night he brings her like an image of the shroud and says, "Look, it's almost dry. Thank you. I'm able to leave now." And the next night she continues to avoid crying and the shroud dries. She never sees the boy again. And that's the story. For a story so short, I felt very inspired. So here's the encounter I came up with for this. One night, while the party's resting, they hear the sound of a child playing. They will probably go and investigate, and they'll find a little boy playing with a ball. Maybe they know this is a ghost, maybe they can't tell. Oftentimes in Feywild lore, the realm between the Feywild and the dead is quite thin, and so ghosts could look more real. Maybe the boy just tells them that he's a ghost, or it's pretty obvious, and he also shares that he wants to move on, but his mother won't let him. If they ask about his mother, he can say, "Oh, she lives in a cottage just down the road." Maybe they go and see her. I'm assuming a party is curious enough to follow these cues, and if they do, they will come upon a warm, cozy cottage where if they peer through the window, they'll see a woman weeping inside. I sort of branch off into two options here, whether you just want to make this a bit sad or kind of like spooky and violent. For both options, the mother is a ghost as well. In one of them, she doesn't know she's a ghost. She just thinks that her son has passed and she is mourning him. And so if the party is able to convince her that she is also dead and also a ghost, and maybe they can move on together, something like that, then it ends and maybe the entire cottage disappears. Or maybe the little boy was trying to trick them. These are very malevolent ghosts, and as soon as they step foot in this cottage, doors slam shut and the mother and the young boy both attack the party. And if you want to make this kind of violent, beef them up a little. If the realm between the Feywild and the dead is thin here, if that veil is very thin, then make ghosts a little stronger. This last fairy tale is the strangest one to me, and I found it delightful. It's called Little One Eye, Little Two Eyes, Little Three Eyes, and it's from Andrew Lang's fairy books. This story is sort of evil stepmother, evil stepsisters, and like a good child. You'll see. A mother has 3 daughters. One of them has 1 eye, one of them has 2 eyes, one of them has 3 eyes. Did you see that coming? And they hate the 2-eyed girl. To the mother and the stepdaughters, because the 2-eyed girl looks so normal, they just think she's boring and the worst, and they abuse her. They don't feed her nearly enough, and 2 Eyes, they're just called by the number of eyes they have, is distraught. She's also in charge of the goats. So she goes out to take care of the goats one day, and she's starving and she's weeping, and a beautiful woman appears before her and asks what's wrong. The little girl explains. The woman tells her not to worry, to go to her favorite goat and say, "Little goat, bleat, little table, appear." And a table full of wonderful food will appear, and when the girl is done and had her fill, she will then say, "Little goat, bleat, little table, away," and all evidence will disappear. The girl does it, it works, she starts to be well fed, and the family takes notice. They're like, "Why are you not eating the scraps we're throwing you? What's that about?" The mom sends little One Eye to go sort of spy on little Two Eyes, and so the girls go out together that day to watch the goats, and little Two Eyes knows what's happening, and so she tells a story that puts little One Eye to sleep. The girl is able to eat, and little One Eye does not gain any information. The next day, little Three Eyes is put on the job, and while little Two Eyes manages to tell her a story that puts 2 of the eyes to sleep, the third one stays awake. Because little Two Eyes doesn't know that little Three Eyes has one of her eyes still watching, she of course makes the table appear, and the family figures out how she's eating so well. And so they kill the goat. Little Two Eyes is distraught, but the beautiful woman appears again and says, "Hey, don't worry, just get the heart of the goat, bury it, and you'll be okay." She asks her sisters for the heart. They think it's a stupid request. They give it to her, she buries it, and the very next day, a tree with silver branches and leaves and golden apples has sprouted from the earth. The only person in this family who can get anything off this tree is little Two Eyes. It's considered her tree. She's the only one who can pluck an apple off it. The twigs don't bend away from her. She has control over this tree, or at least it lets her enjoy it. A knight comes by and I think offers to like marry whoever can give him a twig from this tree. He's so amazed by it. Or at least he offers to do some sort of favor. And so of course the little evil stepsister figures try to take a twig from the tree, but the tree won't let them. Eventually little Two Eyes is able to emerge from her hiding. I think the sisters tried to like shove her away, and she goes and plucks a branch off the tree. The knight is like, amazing, thank you, what can I do? And she's like, get me out of here. She explains that her life is miserable. He says, all right, come with me. I'll marry you. You can hang out with me. And she does. The next day when she wakes up in a beautiful castle, she's now well fed, taken care of, loved. The tree is outside her window. And eventually beggar people come to the castle needing food. Turns out it's her old family, and they like forgive each other and, you know, are nice to each other now. Yeah. Once again, I think there's a few things you could do with this story, but here's my idea. Make little 1, 2, and 3 Eyes baby hags. I talked in a previous video about Baba Yaga about how hags are created. Technically, they don't become hags until they're 13, but maybe the mother is a hag, raising them with the knowledge that they are also going to become hags, teaching them how to be evil and bitter. So even if they haven't come into their power, they are still like hag-like. I mean, you can make your hags however you want to make them. But I'm thinking the one-eyed girl could even be like a Cyclops hag, something like that. Little Two Eyes could look like a totally normal being, maybe like an Eladrin or a human, just normal looking gal. And that's why her sisters hate her, because hags love disgusting, evil things, and she doesn't look that way. And then maybe Three Eyes can actually have like an open third eye. I found a third eye thing on a D&D wiki. I'll link it below. Maybe it's something you can use like once a day. I haven't really looked into it, but I thought it would be helpful for this creature or character if she had these abilities all the time. I think it would make her extra spooky. There's Psychic Focus, where while focused on this discipline, you have dark vision with a range of 60 feet. There's Tremor Sense. As a bonus action, you gain Tremor Sense with a radius of 30 feet, but again, this would be something that she could do all the time if you want to make her kind of scary. Unwavering Eye, advantage on wisdom checks. Piercing Sight, ability to see through objects that are 1 foot thick within 30 feet of you. And True Sight. If she just had True Sight all the time with this third eye, that'd be insane. So how should the party interact with these young hags, meet them? What should their experience be? I again sort of have two ideas with this one. They could be introduced either through the older hag, who maybe they defeat or they know is evil, and when they're trying to do some recon, see these other 3 young children. It might be kind of obvious that 2 of them at least are evil in some way or hag-like, but the third one looks very normal. She just looks like a girl, you know, and maybe she looks miserable. They think she needs to be saved. They don't know that she is also a future hag. Maybe they could try to rescue her, which could create some weird consequences in the future. Or maybe they realize she's a hag, but they don't know how they feel about, you know, killing young children. If I were to put this in my campaign and present this to my players, I think I would make it so that in the future, these 3 children are going to become a coven. The party doesn't necessarily know that. Maybe they might suspect it, but I think that would be a pretty cool consequence that could come back down the line. I am going to put a little baby hag in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight campaign, which is not normally in the source book, but I kind of screwed up. These are spoilers for that campaign, by the way, but the party has met the first of the 3 hags and killed her, which they were not supposed to do. I was supposed to have her either escape, but because of a weakness they utilized, she couldn't do the verbal components, or jump out a window, go through a mirror portal. She wasn't supposed to die. But they had these pipes that are supposed to, you know, create fear, and so she couldn't get any closer to that character who was causing the fear, and she could not roll out of it. I kept rolling low for that save, and so she couldn't get near a window or the mirror, and they killed her. How I screwed up is they weren't supposed to have these pipes yet. And if they hadn't, then Pavlorna would still be alive right now. But like when they met the character with the pipes who gave it to them, the way they role played with him, it just made sense. And so I let that happen. So I can't have a full coven now, but I am going to put a little baby hag with the second hag and just give them a little moral conundrum to work with there. I know one of my players at least will not care at all. She's probably going to be team destroy the future evil child, but I have other players who are going to be like, hold on now. still a child. Maybe we just wait. Maybe we just wait and see. Anyway, what do you think of these stories? Do you want to use them? How would you use them? What would you change? What do you think of my ideas? Basically, I want you to comment your thoughts, because I love your thoughts. Like I said, I'm down to do a part 2. Let me know if there's something else you want me to add to my list of things to talk about. Like, subscribe, have a great whatever it is, and I will see you next time.